Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc ended his trip to Washington early. The government official says the meeting was positive, but as these trade talks continue, Canada is looking to expand its trading relationships beyond the U.S.
Canada is no longer waiting for Washington to change its mind. In the middle of tense tariff talks with the Trump administration, Ottawa is making a clear move toward Europe. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Industry Minister Mélanie Joly have been on a mission that goes beyond diplomacy.
I think also we need to make sure that meanwhile we not become completely over-reliant on the U.S. And that is why I'm in Germany right now, in Europe, as I'm working on making sure that we're helping businesses pivot and try to become closer to European businesses and also to European governments.
The message is simple. Canada will not remain locked into a one-sided relationship with the United States. Instead, the country is building a new axis of cooperation with Europe, anchored in energy and artificial intelligence. By placing these sectors at the heart of its agenda, Canada is showing that the future will not be dictated by tariffs. It will be shaped by investment in infrastructure and the industries of tomorrow.
Our government is in the process of unleashing $500 billion of investment in energy infrastructure, port infrastructure, particularly intelligence infrastructure as well, with AI.
At home, the Canadian government has announced an investment plan of $500 billion Canadian dollars, focused on energy, ports, and advanced digital systems, including artificial intelligence. This is one of the largest industrial packages in modern Canadian history. Energy remains central. Canada is already the largest foreign supplier of crude oil to the United States, exporting nearly 3.9 million barrels per day in 2024, according to Statistics Canada. Ottawa now aims to connect more directly with Europe through LNG and hydrogen corridors. Artificial intelligence is the other pillar. Canada is expanding AI infrastructure, recognizing that modern AI requires massive and stable energy supplies. By combining energy and AI in one strategy, Canada is positioning itself not only as a resource power, but also as a digital leader. The European trip provided the first concrete steps. In Germany, Canada signed a declaration of intent on strategic minerals, covering resources such as lithium, cobalt, nickel, and gallium. These are critical for clean energy and advanced electronics. Several business-to-business agreements linked Canadian miners with European manufacturers, giving the partnership traction. On energy, both sides reaffirmed support for hydrogen trade, and Ottawa signaled that LNG capacity would be expanded to meet European demand. For Europe, long reliant on external suppliers, Canada represents a stable and friendly alternative. The partnership also extends into the digital sphere. Canada and the EU upgraded their cooperation to cover artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and high-performance computing. The aim is to align standards so AI products and data security systems can move more freely across the Atlantic. This is not just about regulation. It is about giving Canadian firms access to European research programs and creating an ecosystem that can scale globally. Carney's recent move shows Canada is not trapped in endless retaliation. Instead of escalating tariffs, Ottawa lifted some countermeasures while keeping steel and aluminum protected. This avoided extra costs for Canadian consumers and shifted the focus toward building stronger alliances. The contrast with Washington is striking. Trump relies on short-term pressure through tariffs, while Canada invests in energy and artificial intelligence as long-term tools of influence. Trump may win headlines for confrontational tactics, but Canada is laying foundations that will outlast the trade disputes of the moment. The result is clear. Pressure from Washington has not weakened Canada. It has accelerated a pivot that strengthens ties with Europe and positions Canada as both an energy power and a technology partner. Far from being isolated, Canada is emerging as one of the few nations able to connect natural resources with digital innovation. In the end, tariffs rise and fall, but infrastructure and AI ecosystems once built endure for decades. That is the real story of Canada's response. Under pressure from Trump, Canada has turned challenge into leverage and is carving out a leadership role in the global economy of tomorrow.
Energy prices are climbing more than twice as fast as inflation as the impacts of Trump administration policies begin to take effect.
Across the United States, energy prices are climbing at a pace households cannot ignore. The Consumer Price Index rose by 2.7% over the past 12 months, but energy bills jumped more than 5.5%. Nearly 60 utility companies are preparing to raise rates in 2025, adding more than $38 billion for electricity customers and another $3.5 billion for natural gas users. Demand for power is surging faster than at any point in decades.
We have never seen a demand for energy at this level for decades, and a lot of that is driven by data centers, artificial intelligence, electric cars, the way we're electrifying our lives. We're requiring more power now than we ever have for decades.
Data centers for artificial intelligence, the spread of electric vehicles, and the electrification of daily life are putting immense pressure on an aging grid. At the very moment when President Donald Trump is calling for manufacturing to return to American soil, the foundation of that vision, cheap and reliable energy, is under strain. Recently, Trump held a call with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. Ottawa described it as a wide-ranging conversation on trade and economic priorities. The call raises a larger question. If America wants to bring production back home, and if energy is the missing piece, was Trump reaching out to Canada because he knows that Carney holds much of what he needs? Trump has built his second term around tariffs as a lever to force companies back to U.S. soil. This month, he announced a 100% tariff on imported semiconductors, with exemptions only for firms that commit to manufacturing inside the United States. The goal is clear. By raising the cost of imports, Washington hopes to push supply chains to relocate. This strategy does not stop with technology. Tariffs on steel and aluminum remain at 50%. Imports of transformers and electrical equipment essential for the grid are also caught. The administration wants to tilt the playing field toward domestic production, but the unintended consequence is rising costs for the very infrastructure needed to power Trump's vision. Coal plants are being kept open longer, and proposals for new gas plants have been revived. Yet building a plant takes years, and turbine costs have tripled. Coal is still more expensive than natural gas or renewables. Regulators warn that extending the life of coal plants will add costs that utilities pass on to customers. The paradox is clear. Tariffs may bring factories back, but they also risk driving energy bills higher.
My government fully recognizes that to build Canada into an energy superpower will make Canada the global supplier of choice for critical metals and minerals, diversifying our trading partners and increasing our strategic leverage with the United States.
While the United States struggles with higher costs, Canada holds almost everything Trump needs to realize his ambition. Prime Minister Mark Carney has outlined a plan to build Canada into an energy superpower. His government is investing in critical minerals and clean power generation. British Columbia alone hosts 16 types of critical minerals used in solar panels, electric vehicles, and semiconductors. Ottawa is funding infrastructure to connect resources from mine to rail to market, aiming to become the supplier of choice outside China and Russia. At the same time, Canada is scaling up solar, wind, hydrogen, and nuclear energy, while promising to make its conventional oil and gas the lowest emission in the world. Canada already supplies over 4 million barrels of oil per day, more than 8 billion cubic feet of natural gas daily, and more than 80% of U.S. electricity imports. It also provides about a quarter of the uranium-fueling U.S. nuclear plants. These are not marginal figures. They are the backbone of North America's energy system. That is why the recent phone call between Trump and Carney deserves attention. Ottawa described it as a productive discussion on trade and economic priorities. The White House offered no public details. But the timing speaks for itself. As American demand for electricity accelerates and as tariffs raise the cost of building energy infrastructure, Canada stands out as the only reliable partner with the scale to fill the gap. The trajectory is clear. Trump's tariffs may generate headlines and political momentum, yet they carry a price that American consumers are already beginning to pay. Canada, by contrast, is strengthening its position as a strategic energy power. No matter how ambitious the effort to bring manufacturing back to America, it cannot succeed without energy. And in North America, much of that energy runs through Canada.
The number one American vehicle built and made around the world is the Ford F-Series trucks. They're all aluminum. And they buy it from Quebec. I hit those things and I think, you know what, some of that pressure of the self-inflicted harm that they're doing on the U.S. auto sector is starting to finally bubble up.
After months of escalating trade tensions, August 1st marked another sharp turn. Donald Trump's administration raised tariffs on Canadian goods not covered by the USMCA. And this time, steel took center stage. Steel and aluminum now face a 50% levy, the highest among all sectors. It's not the first tariff Canada has faced under Trump, but it's the most economically disruptive and symbolically aggressive. What's different now isn't just the number, it's the target. Steel isn't a fringe export. It's the backbone of Canada's contribution to North America's auto supply chain. And by striking at this core, Trump isn't just pressuring Canada. He's shaking the very structure of his own industrial base.
It was a tremendous impact. I mean, these are customers and distributors we had been dealing with for many, many years. Unfortunately, the threat of the tariffs was enough to create an uncertain business climate. So our American business evaporated essentially overnight in February.
Canada supplies vast amounts of steel and auto parts to U.S. car makers, from chassis frames to precision components. When tariffs climb, Canadian exporters are often the first to feel the squeeze. The Canadian Auto Parts Manufacturers Association reports that exports to the U.S. have already dropped by 25 to 35%, depending on the company. That's not just numbers. Those are lost contracts, idle factories, and laid-off workers. In Toronto, a manufacturer like Conquest Steel experienced a sharp collapse in its U.S. orders earlier this year, not because of actual tariff enforcement, but because of uncertainty. The fear of policy instability alone was enough to freeze cross-border business. Still, rather than retaliate hastily, many in Canada are pivoting. Companies are refocusing on domestic customers, creating new product lines, and investing in long-term manufacturing capacity. Prime Minister Mark Carney's approach isn't about short-term revenge. It's about structural resilience.
I'm listening to Ford and General Motors, who are pivotal in this, starting to say things like, you're burning all of our profit.
Yet as Canadian suppliers reel from the tariffs, the pain isn't stopping at the border. The shock is rippling straight into Detroit. The U.S. auto industry depends on Canadian steel and aluminum, especially for high-volume vehicles like the Ford F-Series, which relies heavily on aluminum from Quebec. As raw material prices rise, so does the cost of assembly. Automakers can't simply switch suppliers overnight. Industry estimates warn that U.S. vehicle prices could rise by several $1,000s depending on the model, materials, and sourcing, with some projections reaching as high as $9,000 in the most tariff-exposed cases. Trump may be aiming at Canada, but the hit is landing in Michigan. This trade move wasn't born from long-term strategy. It was part of a broader performance. Trump imposed a rigid August 1st deadline and challenged countries to accept bilateral deals, many of them thin on structural substance. Canada refused to follow the pattern. While Japan, Korea, and parts of the EU agreed to expedited deals, Canada held its ground. According to Jean Charest, a senior member of Canada's U.S. Relations Council, many of these agreements are already showing signs of strain. Canada chose not to rush, and for good reason. Carney's government made it clear, a bad deal signed under pressure isn't worth the ink.
If the White House does things that are good for Detroit, they're going to be good for Ontario. The problem is they're aiming at everywhere and hitting us all, and they're going to sink important American companies along the way.
Trump's steel tariffs were meant to punish a neighbor, but the consequences may be greater for his own economy. While Canada is adapting, investing inward, and planning beyond the US market, American automakers are locked into a disrupted supply chain with rising costs and no clear off-ramp. This isn't just a bilateral dispute. It's a test of economic leadership, and as the pressure mounts, it's becoming clear. Canada may be taking the hit, but it's America's industrial base that's absorbing the blow.